No, I won't let hunger claim anyone else, whispered Anya, the icy wind of Yakutia cutting her skin like obsidian blades. Her people were wasting away, the children's eyes empty as the eternal winter tightened its deadly embrace. The only hope, a 5,000 kilo ice buffalo, a living legend of brutal strength, a challenge even the most experienced men dared not face. With the weight of the village on her fragile shoulders and her late husband's rusted spear in her hands, she set out into the heart of the blizzard, the distant roar of the beast already echoing in her bones. And what she discovered in the frozen darkness would challenge everything she knew about life, death, and the true meaning of sacrifice. The wind howled, an ancestral lament that seemed to carry the prayers and fears of her people. Anya felt it pierce her layers of reindeer hide, but she did not flinch. Her feet, clad in sealskin boots, sank into the soft snow, each step a battle against the white expanse that stretched as far as the eye could see. Borislav's spear, heavy and cold in her hands, was more than a weapon. It was a link, a piece of her husband that she now wielded, feeling the weight of all his memories and teachings. He always said that the snow spoke, that the ice sang, and that the silence of Yakutia held secrets for those who knew how to listen. She closed her eyes for an instant, her face marked by pain and determination. The image of the village children's hungry eyes, the muffled cries of the mothers, the despair of the few remaining hunters, all crowded in her mind, propelling her forward. That ice buffalo was not just a beast, it was the embodiment of hope, the thin line between life and annihilation. A tremor ran through her body, not just from the cold, but from the magnitude of the task. She was a woman, a widow, and she was about to face what the most robust men in the village feared. Doubt tried to settle in, a whispering voice questioning her sanity, but Anya silenced it. "I am Anya, daughter of the ice, wife of Borislav," she murmured to herself, her voice hoarse, almost inaudible against the fury of the wind. Her fingers tightened around the spear shaft, feeling the worn wood beneath her glove. Borislav had taught her to read the wind, to feel the vibrations of the ground through the soles of her feet, to decipher the messages nature sent. He taught her that strength resided not only in muscles, but in the mind and heart. And now she needed all that wisdom. She began to observe, not just the falling snow, but how it accumulated in certain directions, indicating the prevailing wind's strength. She looked for subtle signs, an unusually broken branch, an almost imperceptible mark on the frozen surface that could be an ancient footprint covered by the blizzard. Her eyes, accustomed to the white expanse, began to discern patterns, to see beyond the obvious. A small crack in the ice, a cluster of bushes twisted by the cold, everything became part of an invisible map that only she, guided by Borislav's memory, could read. Solitude was a heavy burden, but also an ally. There were no voices to question, only her own resilience. She remembered Borislav, sitting by the fire, telling stories of ancestral hunters who faced impossible challenges, not with brute force, but with cunning and patience. The greatest hunter, he would say, is one who becomes part of the landscape, who thinks like the prey, who feels the pulse of the earth. Anya took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. She was not Borislav, but she carried his legacy. And in that moment, she felt more connected to him than ever, as if his soul guided her through the relentless blizzard. The spear seemed to vibrate in her hands, a silent echo of an ancient promise as she advanced into the unknown, trusting in the wisdom that transcends life and death. Advancing, Anya felt the cold deepen, the air solidifying around her. Each breath was a conscious effort, frozen vapor dancing before her cracked and sore lips. The snow, once a monotonous white carpet, revealed itself as a labyrinth of nuances, textures, and shadows that only trained eyes could discern. Borislav had taught her to see the world as a tapestry of details, each telling a secret story. "Anya," he would say, with his wise and gentle eyes, "the ice buffalo leaves its mark not only on the land, but in the air it breathes. Feel the change, daughter of the wind, and the path will reveal itself before your steps." She stopped, closing her eyes not to rest, but to sharpen other senses, absorbing the vastness. The wind, once a lament, now whispered patterns, invisible messages. She felt the subtle vibration of the ground through her boots, a distant echo that could be the movement of a colossal mass, or just the ice settling. Doubt was a cold companion, but Anya pushed it to the back of her mind. Her village depended on her. Every hungry face, every trembling child, was a weight that propelled her with desperate urgency. With her eyes open, she focused on the tracks with feverish intensity, a slight depression in the snow, almost imperceptible, where an immense weight had rested for an instant. A dwarf willow bush, cleanly broken, not by the biting wind, but by a colossal and deliberate force. And then she saw it. A footprint. Not a common footprint, but a crater in the compacted snow, so vast that her own feet could fit inside it several times over, a silent testament to the beast's size. It was the unmistakable mark of the ice buffalo, a seal of its passage, a clear sign that she was on the right path. A shiver ran down her spine, mixing reverent fear with triumph and a pang of deep anxiety. Anya's heart pounded in her chest, a solitary drum in the icy immensity. The spear in her hands seemed to warm with the urgency of the moment, as if Borislav's spirit touched her. He had prepared her for this, though he never imagined it would be she who wielded it on such a mission. She remembered his lessons on patience, on the art of waiting, of observing unseen, of merging with the landscape. "The buffalo is strong, Anya, but it is not invincible. It has its habits, its weaknesses, its paths. Know them as you know your own name, and victory will be yours." The footprint led to a rocky gorge, where the wind howled with redoubled ferocity, sculpting the snow into ghostly and menacing shapes. The air inside was dense and heavy, laden with the scent of ancient ice and subtly of a wild animal of mythical proportions. Anya knew that every step from there would be more dangerous, a plunge into the unknown. The 500 kilos ice buffalo was not just a beast, it was a living monument to nature's indomitable strength, a supreme challenge. Facing it would require more than courage. It would demand the wisdom of generations, the resilience of a people, and the strength of a love that transcended death itself. She gripped the spear, a knot in her throat, and advanced into the darkness, feeling the legendary animal's presence drawing ever closer, like a distant, powerful pulse in the frozen heart of Yakutia itself. The rocky gorge swallowed Anya, the light thinning as the stone and ice walls rose imposingly. The wind, once a howl, now whispered icily, echoing in her soul. Every sound, every crack of the ice amplified her anxiety. She gripped the spear, her knuckles white under her gloves, forcing herself to breathe deeply and slowly. She remembered Borislav. "Anya, panic is the greatest enemy. Stay calm, and your eyes will see, your ears will hear what fear tries to hide." She moved cautiously, her eyes sweeping the shadows. The scent of the ice buffalo was stronger, a wild, musky aroma mixed with the biting cold, indicating the beast's proximity. A shiver ran down her spine, a mix of reverence and terror. She recalled ancestral stories of the buffalo as a guardian spirit. Facing it was a rite, a plea to nature. Her steps were almost silent, her body hunched, trying to merge with the shadows. With each turn, the anticipation grew, a strong beat resonating in her chest. She imagined the colossal creature, its horns like blades of ice, its fur dense and white. The life of her village depended on this encounter, and Anya felt the weight of every neighbor, from the elders to the hungry infants, all placing their faith in her. Suddenly, a sound, not a roar, but a heavy, deep snort that vibrated through the ground and rose through the rocks. Anya stopped abruptly, her heart leaping into her throat. She crouched behind a translucent block of ice, spear pointed, hands steady, her eyes fixed ahead, where the gorge opened slightly. The sound came from there, unmistakable. The ice buffalo was near. She felt the faint warmth emanating from its breath, a strange contrast to the glacial cold. Anya closed her eyes for a second, seeking Borislav's strength, ancestral wisdom. She was not a hunter by trade, but a woman of the ice, shaped by Yakutia's harshness, hardened by loss, and driven by an unwavering love for her people. She remembered Borislav. The hunter's spirit resides not only in strength but in the ability to adapt, to become one with the environment, to listen to what the forest and ice whisper. She opened her eyes, determination burning in her gaze. The gorge widened into a natural amphitheater where snow accumulated in soft mounds and the rocky walls formed shelter. And there he was, a massive and majestic silhouette, partially obscured by a thin mist of vapor. The 500 kilos ice buffalo. Its horns were immense, covered in ice that reflected the faint light, looking like crystal crowns. Its fur, white and thick, blended perfectly with the landscape, making the beast almost invisible, save for its sheer scale. Anya felt a knot in her throat, a mixture of awe and dread. It grazed calmly, oblivious to the small figure hidden in the shadows. It was a moment of unreal peace, a shocking contrast to the desperate urgency. She observed every movement, searching for a point of vulnerability. The spear seemed to weigh a ton, but her heart was steady. Ancestral wisdom, love for her people, and Borislav's memory guided her. This was the moment. She had to act. She took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs, and began to move, crawling silently through the snow. Every muscle tense, every sense sharpened. The battle for her village's survival was about to begin. Anya began to crawl, moving with the slowness of a shadow, every inch of her body obeying an iron discipline. The snow was her ally and enemy, soft to muffle, cold to numb. She remembered Borislav's words, spoken on cold nights by the fire as he sharpened his blades. The hunter who rushes finds death. The patient one finds life. She took a deep breath, vapor freezing on her eyelashes, and focused, becoming an extension of the ice and rock. Her eyes never left the ice buffalo. It continued to graze, tearing at mosses and lichens clinging to exposed rocks, its colossal mass moving with an almost hypnotic slowness. Anya studied its patterns, the way it turned its head, the rhythm of its heavy breath that formed small clouds in the frozen air. Borislav had taught her that every animal had a rhythm, a heart that beat in tune with nature. Finding that rhythm was the key. She looked for any sign of alarm. Nothing, just the majestic indifference of a being that dominated its environment. The spear, once heavy, now felt like an extension of her own arm. She held it firmly, but without rigidity, ready for any eventuality. Her mind flew to the village, to the pale and hungry faces. She felt the cold in her bones, but the image of her people, the promise she had made to herself and Borislav, burned stronger than any flame. It was not just a hunt, it was an act of love, a silent prayer for survival. Fear was still there, a tight knot in her stomach, but it mingled with determination, transforming into focus, into pure and unwavering will. Anya used every rock formation, every snowdrift, as cover. She crawled, stopped, observed. The wind, her old friend and enemy, now seemed to conspire in her favor, muffling the small noises she inevitably made, carrying her scent away from the beast. She approached the buffalo's flank, the less visible side, where the wind blew strongest, creating a natural curtain of snow and sound. Her muscles ached, but she ignored them. Yakutia had taught her and her people to endure pain, to transform it into strength. The distance slowly diminished. Now she could distinguish the details of the buffalo's fur, the way ice encrusted its horns, the small healed wounds on its thick hide. It was a creature of legend, but also of flesh and blood, vulnerable to a precise blow. Borislav always said, "Anya, the hunter does not kill out of cruelty, but out of necessity, and necessity demands respect. Respect the life you take, and the life of your people will be preserved." She felt that respect, that deep connection with the creature she was about to challenge. She was a few meters away. The air trembled with the presence of the ice buffalo. She could hear the wet sound of its chewing, the rustle of its fur. Her eyes found a spot, a small, vulnerable area that Borislav had shown her in drawings in the snow years ago. It was the moment. The spear rose slightly, the weight of the village in her hands, Borislav's spirit in her heart. She took a deep breath, gathering all her courage, all her ancestral wisdom. The battle was about to begin, not with a war cry, but with the silent and determined promise of a woman. Anya moved, not a leap, but a slow, deliberate slide, like the ice itself. Every muscle, trained by life in the harshest conditions, responded. Borislav's spear, once a burden, now felt light, an extension of her will. Her eyes, fixed on the massive flank of the ice buffalo, sought the exact spot her husband had drawn in the snow, the vulnerability of brute force. The buffalo continued to graze, oblivious. Its breath formed clouds in the air, and the sound of its chewing broke the silence. Anya felt respect for the majestic creature. The hunt was not about hatred, but the continuity of life, the interconnection between hunter and prey. Borislav had said that the animal's spirit united with that of the village, ensuring strength and survival. She crawled, her body low, feeling the penetrating cold of the snow. The icy air burned her nostrils. Yakutia demanded everything. Her daughter Lena's face appeared in her mind, her hungry eyes. Lena's image propelled her, transforming fear into cold energy. There was no room for failure, only the urgency of securing her people's future. The distance diminished. Anya saw the ancient scars on the buffalo's hide, marks of battles. It was a survivor like her. The spear in her hand seemed to vibrate with Borislav's memory, as if he guided her. "Anya," he had whispered, "the buffalo will sense your intention. Be true, be respectful, and it will give you what you need." She felt the truth. A slight tremor ran through the ground. The buffalo stopped grazing, raising its head. Its dark eyes swept the landscape. Anya froze, an ice statue, her heart beating erratically. Had it noticed? The tension was palpable, an invisible thread between her and the creature. She held her breath, praying her camouflage was sufficient. The buffalo snorted, a deep sound that echoed off the walls. It moved its head, sniffing the air. Anya felt a cold sweat trickle down. It wasn't paralyzing fear, but the adrenaline that precedes the decisive moment. She remembered Borislav, his unwavering calm. "Anya, the hunter does not rush. He waits. He observes. He becomes the wind, the snow, the shadow." Slowly, the buffalo lowered its head and resumed grazing. Anya released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding, a brief relief. It hadn't detected her or didn't consider her a threat. This gave her time, a moment to position herself. She needed to be at the right angle, with the strength and precision for a single blow. There would be no second chance. She continued to crawl, even slower, each movement calculated. The vulnerable spot was clearer, a small area where the fur seemed less dense, where life pulsed. The spear was ready, her fingers tightened around the shaft. The determination in her gaze was unwavering. The village, Borislav's memory, the promise of life, all merged into a single purpose. Anya was ready. The final confrontation was moments away, and she would not hesitate. Anya raised the spear. There was no war cry, only the heavy silence of Yakutia and the sound of her own heart pounding in her chest. With a fluid movement, learned not from hunts, but from years of observation, and Borislav's whispered wisdom, she thrust the spear. The blow was precise, finding the vulnerable spot with astonishing certainty, a dance of cunning and necessity. The ice buffalo shuddered. A deep, resonant sound escaped its throat, not a roar of fury, but an ancestral lament that seemed to echo the very pain of the world. Anya expected a battle, a wild fury, but what happened defied everything she knew. The buffalo did not attack. Instead, its dark, deep eyes turned to Anya. In them, she saw not anger or fear, but a solemn acceptance, an understanding that transcended the barrier between species. It was as if the creature, an ancient spirit of the ice, was offering itself, recognizing the woman's desperate urgency and the purity of her purpose. Slowly, with a dignity that broke Anya's heart, the buffalo began to lower its colossal body. It was not a violent fall, but a gentle settling into the snow, a sigh that seemed to release the weight of ages. Its ice horns touched the ground, and its breath slowed until it ceased, leaving an even deeper silence. Anya felt a wave of overwhelming emotions. Triumph, yes, but also a profound sadness, a reverence for the life that had been given. It was not a victory of brute force, but of connection, of an accepted sacrifice. Borislav's spear had fulfilled its destiny, but in a way he could never have foreseen. Anya knelt in the snow, her hand on the buffalo's thick fur, feeling the warmth fading away. The village would be saved, but the price, the lesson, was far greater than the meat she would take home. She had found not just food, but a profound truth about life and death in Yakutia. Anya remained there, kneeling, the cold of the snow penetrating her clothes, but the warmth of the life fading under her hand held her captive to that instant. Tears, long frozen within, threatened to surface, but she held them back. It was not a time for personal grief, but for gratitude and the immense responsibility that now weighed on her shoulders. The silence that followed the ice buffalo's passing was more deafening than any howl of the wind, a vacuum filled only by the slow, heavy beat of her own heart. She stroked the dense fur, feeling the rough texture and the creature's majesty. Borislav had always said that the first act after a successful hunt was to honor the animal's spirit, thanking it for its sacrifice. Anya closed her eyes, murmuring ancient prayers in Yakut, words her grandmother and mother had taught her, speaking of respect, the cycle of life, and interconnectedness. The sun began to move on the horizon, painting the sky with pale shades of pink and purple, a cruel reminder of the fleeting time. The task before her was monumental. A 500-kilogram buffalo was not just a source of food, it was a mountain of meat, bones and hide, a challenge that would require the strength of several men. But Anya was alone. Anya's mind began to work, organized and methodical, as Borislav had trained her. Anya, the hunt doesn't end with the strike. It ends when the last portion of meat is safely home and the hide treated. Every part has its value, every step, its reason. She stood up, the spear still in her hands, and began to inspect the buffalo, looking for the points Borislav had shown her to begin the work. The biting cold began to intensify again, and Anya knew she couldn't waste time. She removed her gloves, revealing her calloused hands, and took Borislav's knife, sharpened with care. The icy metal burned her skin, but she ignored the pain. The first cut was always the hardest, a break in the cycle, the beginning of life's transformation into sustenance. She focused on the task, each movement deliberate, every muscle tense. The hide was incredibly thick, and the work was exhausting. Her arms ached. Cold sweat trickled down her forehead, but the image of Lena, of her small daughter with hungry eyes, was a fire burning in her chest, warming her against the cold and fatigue. She remembered her people's stories of how women were often as strong and resilient as men, not in brute force but in persistence, intelligence, and the capacity to endure. Anya was not just cutting meat. She was weaving hope, securing tomorrow. The scent of blood, warm and metallic, mingled with the icy air, a primal fragrance of life and death. She worked without stopping, her thoughts focused on technique, efficiency, necessity. With each piece of meat she managed to separate, she felt relief and a renewed wave of determination. The sun was already low when Anya managed to separate the first large portions of meat. She dragged them with immense difficulty to a more sheltered spot near the rocks, where they could be protected from predators and excessive freezing. The weight was overwhelming, but she used Borislav's wisdom about levers and the use of the sled she had brought with her. It was a simple but sturdy sled, which now seemed too small for the load. She knew that taking everything at once would be impossible. She would have to make several trips or find a way to signal the village. The idea of leaving part of the meat unprotected distressed her, but there was no other choice. She needed to return, and quickly. Anya looked at the buffalo, now partially stripped, and then at the darkening sky. Night would bring with it an even more intense cold, and the dangers of the vastness. She needed a plan, and she needed to act with the speed and intelligence that Borislav so valued. The first part of the mission was accomplished. Now the real challenge began, bringing life back home. She took a deep breath, the icy air filling her lungs, and a new wave of strength invaded her body. There was no time for rest, only for the next stage of the journey. The village waited. Anya took a deep breath, the icy air filling her lungs, and a new wave of strength invaded her body. There was no time for rest, only for the next stage of the journey. She looked at the sled, then at the mountain of meat that remained from the buffalo. The weight was immense. The task of moving everything at once, impossible. Her muscles screamed with fatigue, and the approaching night's cold promised to be even crueler. Anya felt a tightness in her chest. Leaving the meat there, unprotected, was like leaving her people's hope at the mercy of the elements and predators. Wolves, perhaps, or hungry bears, drawn by the scent. Yakutia did not forgive carelessness. But what to do? Trying to drag everything in multiple trips would be suicide. Time was the enemy, and with each passing hour, the village withered a little more. She closed her eyes for an instant, seeking the clarity Borislav always possessed in moments of crisis. "Anya," he would say, "the hunter's greatest strength is not the spear, but the mind. Think like the ice, which finds the easiest path to water, or like the wind, which bypasses the mountain." Ancestral wisdom was not just about hunting, but about survival, about finding solutions where there seemed to be none. Slowly, Anya opened her eyes. The plan formed in her mind, painful but necessary. She couldn't take everything, but she could protect what remained. And she could take enough to rekindle the flame of hope in the village, to give them a reprieve while she returned with help. With deliberate movements, despite her fatigue, Anya began to work on creating a hiding place for the remaining meat. She used blocks of ice and compacted snow, forming a kind of improvised chamber covered with hides she had brought for this purpose. Each block was heavy, each movement a struggle against the fatigue and the cold that numbed her fingers. She carefully stacked the meat, ensuring it was as protected as possible from the wind and curious eyes. It was a gamble, an act of faith in her ability to return. As she worked, the image of Lena, of her mother, of all the faces in the village passed through her mind. They were waiting. They trusted her. That trust was her fuel, more potent than any warmth. The pain in her arms and legs was real, but the pain of imagining her people without food was unbearable. Finally, most of the meat was safe in the hiding place. Anya took the portions she had separated first, the easiest to carry, and arranged them on the sled. It was a considerable load, but manageable for a single person with great effort. She tied everything with leather ropes, testing its firmness. Before leaving, Anya looked at the hiding place one last time. "I will return," she whispered to the ice, a solemn promise. Then she raised Borislav's spear, planting it in the snow beside the buffalo as a marker, a sign of her victory and her imminent return. It was a gesture of respect, but also of possession, that this place was hers, and the meat her people's. The sun had already completely disappeared, and the first stars began to prick the dark and vast sky. The wind howled more fiercely, and the temperature plummeted. Anya pulled the sled. The weight was brutal, the snow a constant obstacle. Each step was a battle, but she did not hesitate. The light of the village, though invisible, guided her. She was hope, and hope could not freeze. The journey back, as arduous as the hunt, was just beginning. Anya pulled the sled, every muscle in her body protesting against the effort. The snow beneath her feet was a constant trap, and the wind, now a merciless companion, whipped her face, turning the few tears of exhaustion into ice crystals. The darkness was almost total, broken only by the distant sparkle of the stars. She leaned forward, the weight of the sled pulling her back, but the image of Lena, with her large, hungry eyes, was a magnet that propelled her. "I cannot fail," she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse. "I cannot." In the village, the central flame of the main tent flickered weakly, casting dancing shadows on faces marked by worry. Oksana, the most respected elder, with hair white as snow, sat near the fire, weaving a wicker basket. Her gaze, however, was fixed on the entrance, as if she could, by sheer willpower, conjure Anya's return. The children, huddled in their blankets, tried to sleep, but empty stomachs and the cold seeping through the tent walls made sleep unattainable. "Will she come back, Mother?" "Lena, Anya's small daughter?" asked Oksana, her voice a fragile whisper. Her eyes, which should have shone with innocence, were dull with fear and hunger. Oksana put down the basket and pulled Lena closer. "Anya is strong, my little one. She has Borislav's spirit and the strength of all the women who came before her. She knows the way." The words were for Lena, but also for herself. A spoken prayer to ward off despair. Back in the icy vastness, Anya felt the pang of exhaustion. Her shoulders burned, and her legs felt like lead. With each step, the snow seemed to deepen, making the sled's drag a Herculean task. She remembered Borislav, how he had taught her to distribute weight, to use her own body as a lever. "Anya, the ice is your enemy and your friend. Learn to dance with it, not to fight against it." She tried to dance, but her movements were heavy, clumsy. A dark thought tried to infiltrate her mind. What if she failed? What if the meat froze before she arrived? What if the wolves found the hiding place? She shook her head vigorously, pushing the thoughts away. There was no room for doubt. Doubt was a poison, more lethal than the cold. She pressed her lips together, determination etched into every line of her face. Physical pain was a distraction, a reminder that she was alive, that she could still fight. Anya stopped for an instant, bent over the sled, panting. The icy air burned her lungs. She looked at the sky, searching for the constellation Borislav called the Hunter, a guide in the night skies. There it was, shining coldly, a silent reminder of his presence. She felt a pang of warmth in her chest, an invisible connection with her husband, with the wisdom he had imparted to her. He was with her, in every fiber of her being, in every hesitant step. She resumed her journey, the sled creaking in the snow. The pace was slow but steady. She couldn't run, but she could persist. With each meter gained, the image of the village became clearer in her mind, not as a place of despair, but as a beacon of life, waiting for her light. She was the bridge between death and life, between despair and hope. And she would not break. Her journey was an act of love, a silent oath. In the village, Oksana continued to weave, her old fingers moving with a hypnotic rhythm. She knew that waiting was the hardest part, but also the most necessary. Faith was the last refuge. Lena, nestled in her lap, had finally fallen asleep, her small fingers clutching her grandmother's skin. Oksana looked at the fire, at the embers that still glowed, and whispered an ancient prayer, asking the spirits of the ice to guide Anya home. The night was long, but hope, though fragile, still pulsed. Anya felt the wind change direction, bringing with it a faint, almost imperceptible scent of smoke. Village smoke. Her eyes widened. It was far, still very far, but it was real. A wave of energy coursed through her, dispelling her fatigue for a brief moment. She was on the right path. The village was there, waiting for her. She tightened her hands on the sled's handle, a faint smile appearing on her cold, cracked lips. The miracle was on its way. Anya felt renewed energy, a warmth that seemed to come from the deepest part of her being. The faint, distant scent of smoke was proof that the village existed, that life awaited her. She pulled the sled with a strength she didn't know she still possessed, her muscles tense, but her mind focused on her destination. Each step was lighter, propelled by the promise of reunion, by the vision of Lena smiling. The darkness was still profound, but now it didn't seem so oppressive. It was just a veil that would be torn by the village's light, her own salvation. Meanwhile, in the main tent, Oksana, with her wise and tired eyes, felt a change in the air. It wasn't the wind, but something more subtle, a vibration in the very stillness of the night. She stopped weaving, the wicker basket forgotten in her lap, and looked at the fire. The flames, once sluggish, seemed to dance with more vivacity, casting sharper shadows on the tent walls. The other villagers, huddled in their blankets, noticed the elder's stillness. A man coughed, breaking the heavy silence. "Any sign, Oksana?" he asked, his voice hoarse with despair. Oksana merely shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "Not a sign that eyes can see, my son, but the heart feels." Anya continued her arduous journey. The terrain began to grow more familiar, the rock formations, the small snow-covered hills, all taking on known contours under the pale starlight. Fatigue, though momentarily forgotten, began to reassert itself, a throbbing ache in every joint. But each time discouragement threatened to take over, she remembered the scent of smoke, the promise. She pressed her lips together, her breath coming out in dense clouds. "Almost there," she murmured, and the word seemed to give her new strength. In the village, Lena woke with a start, her eyes fixed on the tent entrance. "Mama," she whispered, feeling a pang of hope. Oksana hugged her, her gaze still fixed on the darkness outside. "Sleep, my little one. Listen to the wind. It brings news." But Lena couldn't sleep. She felt something different, an agitation that was not fear, but anticipation. The other villagers, though skeptical, began to feel the tension in the air, a premonition silently spreading from one to another. Anya could now see a faint glow on the horizon, a yellowish patch against the black of night. It wasn't the dawn, but the light of the village fires, the beacon she so yearned for. A solitary tear ran down her face, freezing instantly, but it was a tear of relief, not pain. She quickened her pace, the sled creaking in protest, but she ignored it. Her lungs burned, but her heart sang. She was almost home. She could distinguish the shapes of the tents, the silhouettes of people beginning to stir, drawn by something they couldn't yet see. Borislav's spear, which she still held firmly, seemed to vibrate in her hands, an extension of her own will. With each step, hope in the village grew, and the certainty that Anya was returning took root in the hearts of the villagers. Little Lena, unable to bear the weight any longer, got up and ran to the tent entrance. She peered out, her small eyes trying to pierce the darkness, and then she saw it, a distant figure, dragging something heavy, moving slowly towards the village. "Mama!" she cried, her voice thin and full of a joy long unheard. Lena's cry echoed through the tents, waking everyone. The villagers rushed out, their faces filled with disbelief and, slowly, with renewed hope. Oksana, with a wide smile and tears in her eyes, stood up and walked to the entrance, her steps firm. Anya was returning. She had succeeded. The miracle indeed was on its way, carried on the shoulders of a woman who refused to give up. The entire village began to stir, a wave of energy and emotion sweeping away the cold. The entire village stirred, a wave of energy and emotion sweeping away the cold. The villagers, once despairing, ran to the entrance, faces lit by the fire, disbelief turning into jubilation. Little Lena was the first to reach her. With short legs, she ran through the snow, stumbling, arms outstretched. "Mama! Mama!" The child's cry, once fragile, was now a hymn of joy that tore through the night. Anya released the sled. Her knees buckled, but she remained standing, arms open. Lena threw herself against her, and Anya hugged her with strength from her soul, the girl's face buried in her shoulder. Lena's warm tears contrasted with the cold of her skin. Anya smelled her daughter's familiar hair, a balm. She kissed Lena's head, her own tears flowing, warm and free. Oksana, with peculiar dignity, approached, her tear-filled eyes fixed on Anya. She said no word, only extended her hand and touched Anya's face, a gesture of profound gratitude and recognition. The elder, who had kept faith, saw her hope materialized. Behind her, the villagers gathered, whispers of astonishment and relief filling the air. They saw the sled, laden with dark, frozen meat, proof of the miracle. Kyle, a robust and skeptical man, knelt in the snow and touched the meat with reverence. His fingers trembled. It's the ice buffalo," he murmured, his voice choked. "Anya, you did it." Disbelief was palpable, soon replaced by respect. Anya, embracing Lena, looked at the faces of her people. She saw the hunger, the fear, the despair that had consumed them, now replaced by a glimmer of hope that she had rekindled. The light of the fires, once weak, seemed stronger, more vibrant, reflecting in everyone's eyes. She was no longer just Borislav's widow. She was Anya, the huntress, the savior. She felt the weight of Borislav's spear in her hand, not of mourning, but of legacy. She raised it slightly, an unconscious gesture. All eyes turned to her, to the symbol of her victory. The spear of the most revered hunter was now an extension of feminine courage. "There's more," Anya managed to say, her voice hoarse with emotion and cold. "Much more. I protected the rest. We need strong men to bring it back before predators find it." Her words were a command, an invitation to action, a restoration of purpose. Kyle stood up immediately, the shame of his doubt turning into fierce determination. "I will go, Anya. I and whoever else you need." Other men, previously paralyzed by fear, began to step forward, their faces lit with a new sense of responsibility. The flame of hope not only burned but spread, warming the hearts of the village. Oksana approached Anya and embraced her. "You brought life back, my daughter. It is the strength our people needed." The elder's embrace was a seal of approval, a recognition worth more than 1,000 words. Anya closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the embrace, the warmth of her daughter, the warmth of her people. She had returned, and with her, the promise of a new dawn for Yakutia. The journey had not ended, but the climax of despair had been overcome. The village was saved, and a new era of resilience and courage began. In a few hours, Kyle and a group of hunters with reinforced sleds and torches set out under Anya's precise guidance. The confidence in their eyes, once absent, was now a flame that propelled them. The village women, led by Oksana, began to unload Anya's sled, the meat being taken to the warmer tents for processing. The scent of fresh meat, long forgotten, filled the air, an aroma of life and rebirth. Lena, still clinging to her mother, watched the preparations with bright eyes, the hunger in her stomach replaced by joyful anticipation. Anya, exhausted but with a deep peace in her heart, was led by Oksana to the main tent. There, she sat near the fire, feeling the warmth penetrate her bones. The physical pain was still present, but it was a different kind of pain now, a pain of overcoming, not of despair. Oksana offered her a hot tea made from rare herbs, and Anya drank it slowly, feeling energy return. "You did what no one dared, Anya," Oksana said, her voice soft but firm. "You honored Borislav and all of us. Your name will be remembered." Anya merely nodded, Oksana's words echoing in her heart. She sought not glory, but the survival of her people, and she had succeeded. When the hunters returned at dawn, with sleds overflowing with meat, the village erupted in celebration. Anya's hiding place had worked perfectly. The ice buffalo, once a terrifying legend, was now tangible salvation. The meat would be enough to feed the village throughout the winter, and perhaps even longer. Hunger, the greatest enemy, had been vanquished. The main conflict, the threat of annihilation, was resolved. Anya watched her people, their faces once pale and dejected, now flushed with fire and joy. The children laughed, the men worked with renewed vigor, and the women sang ancient songs of gratitude. She had transformed the pain of loss into a legacy of unwavering courage, proving that true strength resides in the resilience of the human spirit. Yakutia, in its merciless beauty, had witnessed the triumph of a woman who refused to bend. Yakutia, in its merciless beauty, had witnessed the triumph of a woman who refused to bend. The sun, now slowly ascending on the horizon, painted the sky with shades of pink and orange, a spectacle of colors that seemed to celebrate the village's new dawn. The smoke from the fires, denser and more fragrant, rose in spirals, carrying with it the last vestiges of despair. The smell of meat cooking, a rich and comforting aroma, hung in the air, promising satiety and life. The children, once pale and quiet, now ran and played in the snow, their laughter echoing through the village like bells of joy. Lena, with a piece of cooked meat in her hands, ran to Anya, who was sitting near her tent's entrance, watching the activity. The girl's eyes shone with a vivacity Anya hadn't seen in months. "Mama, it's delicious. You're the best hunter in the world," Lena exclaimed, hugging her mother's legs. Anya smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, dispelling the shadow of sadness that had resided there for so long. She stroked her daughter's hair, feeling the warmth and life emanating from her. Oksana approached, bringing a steaming bowl of soup. Her wise eyes, once laden with worry, now radiated a profound serenity. "Borislav would be proud, my daughter, and so am I. You didn't just bring food, Anya. You brought back the soul of our people." Oksana sat beside Anya, and together they watched the village reborn. The men, once hesitant and fearful, now worked with renewed vigor, their voices full of camaraderie as they cut and stored the meat. Kyle, in particular, seemed to have found a new purpose, leading the others with a confidence Anya had rekindled. The entire village was transforming. The tents, once silent and somber, now buzzed with life. The women sang as they prepared the meat, their voices uniting in ancient harmonies that spoke of gratitude and resilience. Ancestral wisdom, passed down from generation to generation, which seemed to have been lost with despair, now flourished again. They were not just surviving, they were thriving, and all because of one woman's courage. Anya stood up, feeling a new strength in her bones. The physical pain of the journey was still there, but it was a pain that reminded her of her own capability, of her inner strength. She was no longer the grieving widow, but the guardian of hope, the huntress who defied the impossible. Borislav's spear, which she had carefully left inside her tent, was now a symbol of a shared legacy, a bridge between past and future. In the months that followed, winter remained merciless, but Anya's village did not succumb. The meat of the ice buffalo sustained everyone, and the story of her hunt became a legend told around the fires, inspiring courage and unity. Anya, with Oksana's help, began to teach the children and young people about the dangers of the ice and survival techniques, not just hunting, but also the resilience of the spirit. She became a respected leader, a source of wisdom and strength, her example echoing in every heart. Lena grew up under the shadow of a strong and loving mother, learning that true strength resides not only in muscles, but in determination and love. The village, united and stronger than ever, looked to the future with renewed hope, knowing that even in the face of Yakutia's most inhospitable conditions, the human spirit, when driven by love and courage, is capable of overcoming any challenge. Anya, looking at the icy horizon, felt a deep and serene peace. She had found her place, her purpose, and in every falling snowflake she saw the promise of a new cycle, of life and an eternal legacy. Anya, looking at the icy horizon, felt a deep and serene peace. She had found her place, her purpose, and in every falling snowflake she saw the promise of a new cycle, of life and an eternal legacy. Months turned into years, and winter, though still merciless, never again brought the same shadow of despair to the village. The story of Anya and the ice buffalo became the pillar of their existence, a tale whispered around the fires that warmed not only bodies, but also hearts. The children, now more robust and full of life, grew up hearing the saga of their huntress's courage, their eyes shining with admiration and a sense of belonging. Lena, in particular, flourished under her mother's guidance. Her steps in the snow were firm, and her eyes, once small, now observed the world with keen curiosity, absorbing every teaching from Anya and Oksana. She learned not only survival and hunting techniques, but also the importance of empathy, unity, and resilience. Anya, in turn, no longer wielded the spear to hunt the great buffalo, but used it to guide, to teach. She became the undisputed leader, her calm and wise voice revered by all. Her hands, once calloused from hunting, now worked with the delicacy of one who nurtures, helping to organize supplies, plan hunting routes, and mediate small disputes that arose. Oksana, with her hair white as snow, watched Anya with silent pride. The elder saw in Anya not only the salvation of her people, but the embodiment of ancestral wisdom, the bridge between the past and a promising future. Her advice was always welcome, and the partnership between the two women further strengthened the village's social structure. Kyle and the other hunters, once reluctant and gripped by fear, found in Anya an inexhaustible source of inspiration. They became stronger, more united, learning to read nature's signs with new reverence and to work in harmony, knowing that the survival of one depended on the strength of all. The hunts, though challenging, were now collective endeavors, marked by trust and mutual respect. The village, which one day stood on the brink of annihilation, transformed into a beacon of hope in the icy vastness of Yakutia. Its tents, once silent, echoed with laughter and songs, and the smell of cooking meat and drying hides was a constant reminder of its prosperity. The cold of 72 Ashindek was still a reality, but it was no longer a death sentence. It was the backdrop for a story of triumph of a people who refused to yield. Anya, in her moments of quietude, often found herself looking at the starry sky, feeling Borislav's presence. There was no more excruciating pain, only a sweet melancholy, and the certainty that his legacy lived in every smile, in every resilient heart of her village. She had transformed loss into purpose, pain into strength, and fear into courage. True strength, she understood, lay not in the sharpest spear or the strongest muscles, but in the unwavering resilience of the human spirit, in the capacity to love, to fight, and to rise, even in the earth's most inhospitable conditions. Yakutia, in its wild beauty, continued to shape its people, but now they faced it not with resignation, but with the inextinguishable flame of hope, lit by a woman who refused to give up.